Hello there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Talk Music Talk with Boice. This is Boice. This is my podcast you are listening to. Thank you so much for checking it out. If this happens to be your very first time listening to Talk Music Talk, it is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people connected to music from different genres and different backgrounds, established and emerging singers, songwriters, music therapists, music journalists. And on this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to Sonny Burnett, the solo project of Sam Ford. Sam is based in Seattle, recently released his solo debut album, which is called Death of an Empath. And we had a really wonderful conversation, jam-packed. What did we talk about? We talked about transitioning from being in bands to being a solo artist for Sam, his songwriting process, inspirations, using music software versus actual instruments. We also discussed starting music so-called late in life, learning to play an instrument as an adult, being a self-taught musician. Plus, we discussed the making of his debut, Death of an Empath. After the conversation, you will hear a song from it, one of my favorites from it, called Golden. It is also a video, which he talks about in this conversation, just released video, and this was recorded over Zoom, so I apologize for some internet connections. We recorded this back in November. We have been in touch multiple times, and I can attest that he is not only a great musician, he is also a great guy. Here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Sonny Burnett, aka Sam Ford. Enjoy. I love the album, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Death of an Empath. So when was this birth? Was this birth during lockdown? I would say that pre-lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that birth was pre-lockdown, but it kind of got raised up.
Yeah.
During lockdown. That's when it really got reared. Mm-hmm. And I kind of I had, let's see, a couple years after this band that I was in dissolved or moved on, I should say. I had a couple years going through some personal life stuff. I was writing the whole time. And then it was slowly starting to come together, and I realized that it was kind of making its way into being a record. And then I would say kind of pre-lockdown, I really started focusing in on it. And then once lockdown happened, it was like, well, there's nothing to do now but knock this out. So, it was mostly, I would say, the record as you're hearing it was lockdown.
Oh, okay.
Lockdown time.
So the whole concept was like, when did you know were you writing something specifically to say along the theme or what? Or that just happened to be the theme that was coming up?
I would say that like 4 years, after 2016, it kind of became clear that my writing was going to change a little bit. You know, it was like, well, I don't really think I can sort of talk about much else other than what's going on in the world right now, you know? And so, it just kind of started there. And once the pandemic hit and everything else in 2020, it was like, all right, well, I got to like make a big push with this. So I did some more writing, that was, I think, a little bit more specific as far as things that were going on in 2020. And I mean, I guess if I was to sort of give a time frame of the record as a whole, it would be 4 years, give or take. But I would definitely say 2020 is when it was like, all right, this is, you know, full blast right now. Just because it was, I mean, what can you say? It's been a fucking unprecedented, like
whirlwind ride. Yeah,
100%. And so, yeah.
What was your writing like before this album? Like, what would you say is the difference between the two?
I first started when I first started playing music, which actually got started with somewhat late in life. It was very modest. You know, it was like acoustic guitar, strumming chords. It was very like typical kind of like country song type of experience of just like, I just want to write and sing and, you know, keep it, really simple. And it just kind of steadily grew from there. I learned more. I got sort of more technically inclined, I guess you could say, and started working with software. And so there's been a tremendous evolution musically in terms of where I started to where I am now. And the last record that I made with the band that I was in, I think was very, I don't know, I guess I would say it was very much about sound. Mm-hmm. It was very much about rhythm. And I would say that with this record, one thing that would distinguish it would be, I guess, some of the content, you know, some of the actual sort of lyrical themes and, in some ways the way that I'm using my voice. But really I think that this record, I guess, kind of makes sense to me more from a consistent sort of thematic standpoint. Whereas before I think it was a little bit more focused on sound and sort of more abstract things.
Oh, okay. How did you get into adding, like, to say you started as more acoustic, but adding more electronic elements to it?
Well, you know, when I started again, pretty late, all things considered, you know, I had just very like simple aspirations, you know, and I wanted to be able to like strum guitar and sing and again, like just keep it very like dialed in. And I think at some point I was realizing that I just wanted more from the experience of making music. And, you know, so I guess inevitably when you start working with software, you start to realize, well, there's kind of no limit here. You know, you can kind of go to the moon. And so I think at times, particularly over the last few years before this project, I was very interested in like pushing the software end of it and really tapping into, I guess, what it meant to be an electronic artist. And I think with this record, I wanted to remove a little bit of that inclination. And I just wanted to think more about my time writing on the acoustic guitar. And I actually wrote a lot of these songs on the guitar initially and then kind of built them out. But yeah, I think it was the evolution from like acoustic to this record. I kind of like went in some different directions in terms of what I was learning. If I was learning something very quickly, I would want to apply it very quickly. Okay. And now I'm at a point where I think like I can kind of rein it all in and I don't feel so tethered to like, okay, I just like learned how to do this little trick or this thing. So I'm going to kind of make the song about that. You know, I've kind of pulled away from that more and trying to find a little bit more of an organic voice again. Yeah.
What software were you using? And also, do you ever have the issue of with software that you have endless choices, which can be another problem in itself?
Yes. 100%. And I know that problem well. I use Ableton as my primary software in terms of a DAW, an actual like sort of music making program. But yes, it can be boundless. You know, it's interesting because as somebody who is very, I guess, focused on a song, you know, I'm always kind of like looking for a song. And, you know, the software can get you there very quickly or can completely distract you and throw you off. And so finding your identity within the world of software and I guess electronic music becomes kind of a journey unto itself. Because like you said, I mean, you could spend half a day tweaking the most sort of, you know, like the smallest little, like an oscillator on a synth. And you can just sort of, these rabbit holes are everywhere, you know? And so early on when I started working with software, I went down all those rabbit holes, you know, and in some ways I think you have to take yourself down a little bit, in order to find your own voice and in order to figure out, you know, what you're really trying to go for. There's some people who are just producers. There are people that are sound designers, you know, people that are composers, people, you know, it's, and I just think that at this point I'm feeling a little better about kind of bringing it to me, and like getting it to work for me and my particular voice and instincts. So,
okay. And you mentioned that, you started late, and I'm putting late in quotes on your music.
That's okay.
What brought you to that, which I think is good, because sometimes people think, well, if I got to start late, I'm not going to start at all, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely not me. In fact, I went to NYU for acting. And so I did that, somewhat professionally for I would say about 5 years after I graduated. And, then of course made the brilliant leap into the music world,
From one thing to another.
Exactly. But I learned, I was figuring out pretty quickly that for me, I need to just be creating constantly. And even in my time as an actor, I was writing screenplays and stage plays, and I was doing some short story writing. And so I was always kind of staying creatively active, but I just realized, music is going to give me the chance to sort of, pull out, more ideas, more different elements, it'll allow me to collaborate in new ways. And it sort of like, I don't know, it just sort of took over very naturally, and I can't shake it, I'll never be able to stop doing it, and I think for me too, especially because I think I got into it late and I'm completely self-taught. It was like, having revelation after revelation became addictive, and this sort of pure experience of learning, and learning constantly it just became like so wonderful and at times overwhelming, but ultimately just so fulfilling in a way that nothing else ever had. And I still feel that way. I mean, I still, if I, find myself hooking into a moment musically that maybe I've been chasing for a while, or, if I just kind of like even figure out how to do something or play something, it's still that sort of like shot in the arm that you get. It's just, there's just nothing like it. So, I think for people that start maybe a little bit younger, or start when they're kids, their relationship to it can be very different. But I think in some ways, because I started it quote unquote late, and by late, I mean, I have no problem saying I was pretty much in my late 20s. Because of that, it kind of brought the kid out of me at that stage. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah. No, I get that. I was last night with friends and I was gushing because of the fact I've been like self-teaching myself piano with this app called Melodics, and also Ableton. And I was just like gushing because I'm like, as an adult, you have this whole new relationship to learning something new. And it's like no one's making you. Don't have a parent making you. You have to sit there, and it's like you're learning like, oh, I can do this. I didn't know I could do this. Like
totally.
Independence with my left hand. Like that's crazy.
I know. Well, the truth is too, like I've only really been like playing keyboard and like working on that for probably like the last year or two. And so I'm still, I'm playing almost every day, just simply practicing, and it's the sort of thing where again, there's no sort of, I don't know, there's nobody over your shoulder, and as an adult, I guess your relationship to that experience is, I mean, if you let it be, certainly it can be so free, and it can just be, I don't know. I mean, there aren't necessarily any expectations, and, that moment of discovery is just, there's an innocence to it, and I'm just always pursuing that. And it also just reaffirms why I'm doing it. When you kind of, when that left hand gets a little freer, you're able to do this run or whatever. It's funny. And it's interesting too, because, I'll practice some piano, and I don't really have I'm not able to kind of like hear precisely what I'm doing as I'm playing it. Typically when I'm practicing, I'm trying to write simultaneously. And so I'm like, I really don't know, if this, I don't really know if the piano is kind of sounding right. It's pretty like chordal and kind of blocky. But then I'll listen, like I'll play back the demo or whatever I've done. I'm like, sounds like somebody playing a piano, it sounds like it doesn't sound like Chopin, but it's definitely like it's the same thing when I started with guitar. I'm able to kind of like get it to work for me, and obviously I'd like to get better and learn more, but the fact that I can already kind of use it as a foundation on some level is just so wonderful. Yeah. And it's just the best.
Yeah. And it's also having an attitude like you don't have to be at perfection to start the dream. Right. You can just like, I'll keep getting better but I'm going to start now. Right. Instead of like waiting for this high level of proficiency to happen before you can even take a step. So
100%. Yeah. And I would also say that again, because I guess I started a little bit later and so completely self-taught from the ground up. I guess my relationship to it was, for better or worse, was like I never really had this finite result in my mind about it's going to be this or look like this or it's going to involve this. It was just such immersion in the process, and in the learning and trying and failing and then finding these just sort of celestial moments of like, that's the thing that I was kind of dreaming of right there, that musical moment or whatever. And so I never really saw it as anything other than like, the experience of being inside it, if that makes sense. Yeah. My perspective has always been just deep, deep inside the music making and the writing and the learning. So, yeah.
So was this a back burner dream, and why did acting take place first?
It's a great question. It's also a great question now, because I've definitely like had some time with it. I think that it probably was on some level. I think that even if I look at my family, I think they're just generally more musically inclined than any other sort of creative pursuit, generally speaking. And I think it probably was back burner, and it didn't really come to the fore until the circumstances, I suppose, allowed it to. I've always wanted to make things. I've always wanted to, especially write. I've always really wanted to write, and that's always been an instinct. And I think that music really allowed me to, it allowed me to pull from everything that I had sort of wanted maybe as an actor, which was to perform and to explore and to, learn certain things about, human beings, certain thematic pursuits that I think I had as an actor, I was able to pull into music. And then of course, like writing fiction and stage plays and things like that, it was, I want to tell some stories, and I want to be able to communicate them on some level. And then, once I kind of, again, picked up the guitar, very humble sort of experience, I quickly realized I'm going to kind of be able to get the things that I want from this. I think, it's going to kind of all come together here for me, speaking just in terms of like a personal feeling. It wasn't so much about a level of success or this sort of, again, result. It was more just, this is going to kind of check most of the boxes, this thing. And it still does. I mean, and then some. Yeah.
So take me back to you getting a guitar. That was the first instrument?
Yeah, it was the first one.
Like what was the impetus for getting the guitar and to teach yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a while ago. Maybe not that long ago. I think that the music that I primarily grew up with, it just made sense. And not that I just grew up with it, but I think the music that I've most consistently responded to throughout my life, that made the most sense as an instrument. So we're talking about Springsteen, Neil Young, Dylan, Leonard Cohen, Buddy Holly, Curtis Mayfield. I mean, like it's a guitar that kind of like made a lot of sense to me on some level, even though all of these artists have played with bands and their records are fully produced and not necessarily, guitar driven. It's still just, it seemed to make the most sense. And it seemed, in terms of, the sort of Hank Williams, if I can learn a few chords, I might be able to, start to put some stuff together song wise. Yeah. I definitely had the words, and so it seemed to be the most accessible thing at the time. And then of course, over the years, as I've wanted to expand the sound and try new things, you start to introduce a keyboard, not necessarily piano, but just a keyboard. And then you're kind of, the rabbit hole appears, so, but yeah, started with the acoustic guitar. I don't exactly remember. I think my father might have got me my first acoustic guitar. I may be wrong about that, but, and I don't remember, I didn't start picking it up and going at it immediately. And I don't know why that is. I may have still been sort of pursuing acting, with enough focus that I just, the guitar just kind of stayed in the corner for a minute. But I do remember once I picked it up and I decided, I'm going to really like, dig in. It was kind of no looking back. Yeah. And, it was such a great entryway too, because, again, if you can learn just a handful of chords and, make some sense out of them and you've got some words and, you can, it's not about like trying to write some epic thing, but from a just very kind of intimate experience of, strumming along and singing your song, it's pretty powerful. And so, that's how I remember the experience initially. Yeah.
Is there a first song you were like, oh my God, I wrote a song? Or like a song that was good enough for you to say that? If not the first song.
I think that man, there's been so many songs. I mean, sometimes I look back on old beat up marble notebooks, and it's just so funny to just, memory lane like a motherfucker. But I think probably it was less about a specific song and more about finding a verse, a chorus, a bridge. It was like actually being able to put parts together and have them make sense and have them evoke something. And I think, I couldn't tell you which precise song did that, but I do think having a moment like that where more of a traditional song structure revealed itself to me was probably pretty exciting and pretty game changing for me. Not to say that you have to abide by that atypical, kind of classic pop song, but I think it was just a moment of, I kind of took this to some places that are familiar to me in terms of the music that I've been hearing my whole life, which was very cool. So I guess it was less about one single song and more just about kind of a greater writing experience that I remember,
Okay. So your first music project, was that Katie Wire? Am I saying that right?
Katie Wire, yeah.
Katie Wire.
Yeah, that was...
What was the journey from you self-taught to being in a group?
When I started that band, one of my very best friends and my bandmate for the longest time, Nyla, she was living in New York, and we had gone to acting school together a different year, but we kind of were like in the same circles, and I was starting to make the sort of transition into music, not necessarily away from acting as much as it was into music. And and I heard that she was just this sort of Renaissance woman, could play just about any instrument she touched and had a great voice. And I thought to myself, well, I don't really want to sort of do this alone in terms of, like building songs and playing out. And yes, I had always known on some level that I wanted to explore more sounds within a given song. Mm-hmm. And that obviously with just an acoustic guitar, although I didn't mind that, it wasn't kind of going to get me where I wanted to be. So I got in touch with her, and she started to come out to the place I was living in Brooklyn. And then another old friend who was kind of more on the audio engineering production side, mm-hmm. kind of jumped in and started recording some demos. And so it was really just me and Nyla kind of, messing around with some early songs, playing lots of different instruments. Mm-hmm. I mean, random stuff. I played a lot of lap steel guitar, and she was playing like the glockenspiel, and it was really eclectic. And there we were in this strange, like basement, wide open, converted industrial space basement in Brooklyn, recording on her dad's. Oh man, he had this crazy, like, I don't know. It was an analog mixing board, but it was for, I don't know what it was for. It was not really for like music making as much as it was for like broadcasting or something. Okay. But it was analog, and so we were like, yeah, fuck it, we're going to use this. It was free. So,
why not?
Or maybe we had to give him like $150 or something. So yeah, we were just kind of making stuff, and I was writing the whole time and trying to learn more instruments and learn more guitar. And it was, looking back on it, it was like a real, it was kind of wonderful. It was very kinetic, just like throw shit at the wall, mm-hmm. And I think ultimately like how sort of productive it was in terms of what we were able to come out of it with, I think is probably a little bit lacking in that apartment, and mostly because I just didn't have my shit together as a, this is the song, this is the thing. I was much more interested in like kind of rolling around in it than I was, actually like standing up and presenting it. Mm-hmm. So, but it was the genesis of what became Katie Wire, and that went through a few different incarnations and then ultimately led us to Seattle. We moved out to Seattle as a band, as Katie Wire, and played that way for a few years. And I'm giving you kind of the Cliff's Notes here. Yeah. And then Katie Wire kind of disbanded. A handful of weird things happened, but it's probably just, you chalk it up to just like band shit, mm-hmm. and just stuff that goes down, life happening and whatnot. And then we started a new band, which became Goodbye Heart, and Nyla and I did. And we had some other band members coming in and out, but it just became harder and harder to just kind of keep a band together at that mm-hmm. point for any number of reasons. And I was starting to realize that, the work that it took to sort of, keep a band involved in a way that I think we really wanted to experience. Yeah. And of course, not in a position to pay anybody, which is always tricky. It was kind of like, well, we're asking people to give of their time in a way that we expect ourselves to give, which, given how intense we were about it, it just was going to be very difficult to do that, which ultimately led us to become a duo. And we bought a standalone Akai drum machine, just a real, like, real simple kind of entry level machine, and jumped in and learned that. And once again, it was like that early guitar experience of like, oh shit, like this is doing this, and like learning these transitions. And it was very tactile too. So, where software can be, there's a lot that's happening virtually, but this thing was like, buttons blinking at you. And it was really wonderful and very immediate in terms of like engaging with it and getting a result. And so we did that and recorded a single with a B-side and then an EP, and then did this months-long bi-weekly release project where we were essentially dropping a new song every couple weeks and sort of like mixing and probably doing a little bit of producing and writing amidst all of that as well. It was the most intense period of productivity I think I've ever experienced. And when I talk about like those early years of rolling around and, playing lap steel and like singing and just kind of going wild, this was like, this was like good soldier, like really going at it in a very, very strict way, which was also an amazing experience because up until that point, I think, I don't want to say that there'd been a lack of sort of rigidity or just thinking more about the result, but it had definitely never kind of gone into this zone of we have to get this done on these dates. And so it was amazing, very difficult, but incredibly, I learned so much from it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So at what point do you decide to do it on your own?
Yeah. I had a kind of a major personal life experience, family experience. My father got very sick. And at that point, I realized that I was going to have to take care of him quite a bit and be involved in that. And I was living in Seattle. He was in Florida. Okay. So it was going to be a situation where, we would have to kind of change the architecture of the band experience in order to maintain it. In other words, like, think about trying to work remotely in some ways, kind of, maybe transition temporarily into more production and less performance, instincts. That really was the thing that kind of shifted, the band. And that experience of sort of being in Florida and helping to take care of him, that lasted a couple years. Yeah. And the band just, at that point, Nyla, we had been at it for so long, and, one of my absolute best friends, she's like my sister. And, it was just a point at which I think we both needed to, look at ourselves, look at each other, and just kind of say, all right, this may be time. And she ended up moving back east. And, I actually didn't really think about starting something brand new immediately after, the band split. It was, just the shit with my father was so intense. And, I knew that I would get back into it at some point. I just didn't know how or when. And then I think there was a little bit of a break in between my being in Florida. And then I think I sat down, I started to kind of dip in a little bit. And, for me, that can mean a little bit of guitar. It can mean, really focusing on, a drum beat and then trying to start layering some stuff. It can just be lyrics. I don't necessarily have a formula that I always follow. So, it probably involved, just a little bit of like rolling and tumbling in terms of, let me try this. So today I'd like to play a little guitar. It was very, it was very modest initially. And then it started to grow and grow. And then my father ultimately did pass away. And then thanks, man. It was, I will definitely say that like my time being in Florida and taking care of him, that although I don't think it's necessarily, specifically in the record, the kind of energy and the spirit of some of that is there. I'm well aware of that. And definitely some of the songs that made the record, the seeds of those songs were there when he was alive. So yeah, he passed, and I was like, all right, well, this is, I don't really have that string anymore. So let me kind of honor that time and like just give myself back to making music. And I did. And that's, I think, when it probably really picked up steam. And then of course, again, 2020, it was like, this is the year, to get this thing out. And the truth is I was trying to get it out well before the election.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite shake out that way. But I also kind of quickly realized once it wasn't going to happen, I was like, it's okay, because maybe some of the shit that, these songs are kicking around, maybe this stuff's going to kind of still be there for a while, no matter what happens, so.
Because some people aren't going anywhere. So,
Exactly, man. Exactly. That's for sure. And so, I kind of cut myself a break there, but I knew, this year it was like, especially with COVID, I was like, all right, this is, if I hold this back any longer, if I, try to put something in the way of this, I'm just, there's no excuse at this point. So, yeah.
So after, with your father and the band breaking up, does your relationship to music change?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think probably, unequivocally, yes. I think if I try to, explore why, I guess my immediate answer is that my experience with him and taking care of him, along with my stepmother, but I ended up taking care of him in a way that, only I could have. Just some of it father and son shit, some of it very specific to the two of us. It's a really, the history that I had with him, he was a single father for a little while. So, it's a very, very intense history. And he ended up, he ended up in a nursing home, and he did the whole fucking tour, man. He was in rehab, then he was in an assisted living facility, then he ended up back home for a little while, and then he ended up in a skilled nursing facility. So I ended up spending just a ton of time in these places and watching him in these places, and, getting to have relationships with the people that work in these places, which was absolutely incredible. Talk about a group that is just totally marginalized, totally, it's just not a group that people are thinking about, and absolutely should, because what they do is, in some ways, there's no comp for it. It's just, and the whole world of that is, it's so emotional, and it's so, visceral. And so, to see him there and experience that, in addition to him and what he was going through, I think that musically, I realized, I don't think that I can write about the same stuff anymore. I don't know if I can, I think with songwriting, there's an inclination often to write about things that are very identifiable. So typically we're talking about maybe love or heartbreak or stuff like that. And those are things that I'm eminently familiar with, and that I don't have a problem, thinking about them or writing about them. And if I feel like there's a song, that wants writing, that involves some of that stuff, I'm not going to shut it down. But I think what I experienced with my dad was just so, it was so life-changing. It was so impactful. And I think it just made me ask myself, what are you writing about? What does this stuff really mean to you? And there's a Springsteen quote that I always come home to where, I don't know if I'll get it verbatim, but he essentially says that he was always looking for something that he could stand to sing. And I've always taken that to mean can you get up and sing it and believe in it and believe in it forever, and I think the experience with my father kind of got me to ask that, is it, do the songs, do they mean something when I'm on my own? Do they mean something when I'm alone playing them? Do they what am I thinking of when I'm singing them, or if I'm not thinking about anything, why, And so, I think it just drove home for me anyway, the importance of the actual song, not necessarily the music or the result, but more just, what's this actually about? And I would say that doesn't just involve music. It would be across the board for me creatively. So anything I were to do from here on out, I think was very much informed by that experience. And it doesn't have to necessarily, be a song about, an assisted living facility per se, but it's just like, I can't go back to the before of that. And so I guess there's a feeling that anything that I make will be informed by it. And then that just probably means being a little bit more aware of, why this particular thing, why this particular song. Yeah.
Okay. Dude, I had like a revelation when you said that, because I've been dealing with this year about who I interview, and there's been like, publicists have reached out, and then like sometimes ego gets into it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to interview that person because, the publicist reached out to me. And it's like, but yet I really didn't feel the passion behind that person. I really couldn't stand. Now, someone listens to the show, they may not know that, but for me, I know there's guests who I really didn't stand behind, and that there was less pure reasons for doing it. And it's like, I lose the passion of episodes if I do that. And like, I have to, like, it taught me like, no, you have to do shows that you stand behind. And like, no one else may know that, but I know that.
Yeah. It's a huge thing. I mean, that stuff it's easy to get challenged by that every day. Man, it was just it's such a result oriented, reflexive world we're in now, where, and I don't think that one should be introspective to the point of, being hamstrung by it. And, I think, of course, you want to be energized, but I think people do a lot of shit and they're not even aware of why or what it is going to mean or the impact that it might have or not have. And so, I'm just trying to steer away from that a little bit, because it just feels like it's kind of the du jour moment for that. And I, from here on out, I don't really want to be, doing something just to do it, or because maybe it's cool, or because it may present me a certain way. It's like, you got to feel it, So, yeah.
Thank you for crystallizing that.
Yeah, man.
That's wonderful. So the solo debut album is called Death of an Empath. Describe like why that title and the thread through the songs.
Yeah. Well, after 2016,
you're talking about post-election, right?
I'm talking. Yeah, let's get right down to it. I'm definitely talking about post-election, and my father was. He was in the weeds with this shit, right? Like, literally on election day. He's right in the throes of his, like the initial stage of what he was going through, which in some ways was the worst part. And so there's being in Florida. Florida on election day, just start there, and then my dad, and then of course the result. And, there was so much to kind of like take in, and my knee jerk reaction was, all right, well, I'm upset, I feel, with everything that's going on, I feel, really pretty just like devastated, and, but I quickly realized, what am I going to do, in terms of writing? Like, I'm not really going to write songs about Donald Trump, I'm not going to write songs about literal political goings on. I think that I just tried to kind of walk back into some of that early like short story writing, and some of that like stage play writing that I did, and those always began with questions, and that was kind of where I tried to take what became this record. Was just I gotta know why, why we're here, why I'm here in terms of 2016 and this moment, and how we got here, and that's really where it started. And I think that idea of empathy for me, which I've always tried to follow that as an instinct. I've always tried to, I would say not necessarily reserve judgment, but never kind of view anything through the prism of judgment. It's like, I mean, it's just about trying to like tell the story. And I knew it was going to be very difficult, but
without being didactic.
Yeah, exactly. I just, because it was it's just so wild. And it's easy to say that in a given bubble, but I think that certainly leading up to the election, there was no real overt indication that it was going to go the way that it did. And so I think there was probably just the sort of shock of, the day after, and then kind of like, all right, well, what does this mean? But ultimately for me, what does this mean, again, was less about politics and more about, I guess, the country, human beings, Americans, and so that's that. So sorry, to your question, the title was really about exploring what empathy means to me after 2016. Am I capable of it? Am I, is it still an instinct? Really kind of checking in with myself on that, because if I'm honest, I do think that I've lost some, and so probably the record is me trying to get it back. It's just so important to me because I don't want to fall victim to what I think is ailing a lot of people right now, and that doesn't make them, better or worse. I just think that we're living in a time where it's so easy to be angry at the other, and not truly get down to how or why. And I think there are people that are actually actively saying, fuck it, I don't care why or how, those questions are, I'm done asking, and a part of me does understand that, but I guess the artist in me, or the creative person in me, does not want to go there. Wants to keep asking and pursuing. And so I guess the title for me really is about that, is like, am I dying as an empath? Am I surviving? Am I going to be resurrected? I don't know, but that's really where it came from.
Yeah. Because you're talking about having empathy for people we disagree with.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and well, I think it's also empathy about, here's an example, I guess. One thing that I've always been interested in it's an extremely broad theme, but I've always been interested in loneliness. It's always been something that I've sounds odd, but it's something I've always kind of come back to, kind of come home to on some level, as a theme, particularly in this country. And I think that it's kind of incalculable in terms of how it can drive people to do certain things, tweet things, have certain types of relationships with people, cause hardship, drug abuse, mental illness. It's or it can be very liberating, for some people. But if I lose sort of the instinct to examine loneliness as a theme, then it is death of an empath. Yeah. And so, yes, I might not agree with someone or a choice that they've made, but if I can try to understand them through the filter of loneliness, a thing that I feel and share, and I can kind of see where that, just as an example, one example of a theme, where that might kind of, bear out some similarities between us. I can start to understand, well, maybe that's what led you to say or do this, or, it's just about trying to connect in ways that I identify with, that are hopefully devoid of some sort of like overt political experience and more just about a deeply personal one. Yeah.
Yeah. And what is your relationship to loneliness has been this year?
Well, I've been pretty lucky. I'm in a long-term relationship with an incredible partner, and she's an artist as well. And we're very fortunate. We were actually able to lean into lockdown and the pandemic in a way that is just very much like tethered to who we are and to our circumstances. We're in some ways like built for this shit, which is, I'm not like proud to say that, but it actually, it becomes pretty true. That said, experiencing it in others, seeing it everywhere. I've actually been shooting this sort of guerrilla style music video, that I'm trying to release in the coming weeks. And it got me driving all over Seattle and into these neighborhoods I hadn't necessarily been in a while. And, it's devastating, and beyond like the boarded up buildings and places that have already closed and will probably never come back. The people that are out, you can feel a sort of palpable, like, it's loneliness, but I think it's also just where are we? What's going to happen? And even with like positive vaccine news on the horizon and all that, it doesn't necessarily, I don't know, the stuff that I'm kind of seeing and maybe feeling, having been out, particularly in the last week or so, I'm not sure the vaccine cures that, so I think it's less about what this year has sort of like created and more about what it's exposed. And I think that, I that's something that, I don't know how you throw a stimulus at that. I think that is the work of artists. And I think, just human beings to try to account for and kind of rise above. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you this because I asked myself this question on Monday. Monday was my birthday, and I went to dinner. Happy birthday, man! Thank you. I took myself out to dinner because my best friend who takes me out every year was too scared to sit in a restaurant. Which I get.
So you were out for your birthday on your own?
I went, yes. And I sat there and I was like thinking what to be grateful for this year. Like what am I sitting in gratitude with? Because I'm sitting there by myself on my birthday. And I was thinking like I never would have got back into my music if it hadn't been for this year and having the time. So for you, what are you able to look back? It may be too soon because we're kind of still in it, but are you able to look back at 2020 and things that you can feel some gratitude or grace for? Absolutely.
Obviously to release the record, to actually be able to do that, I just feel so grateful for that. The experience of making music completely on your own. There are things that I miss desperately about collaborating or being in a real studio or, but just to be able to kind of like, it's 2 a.m. I can't sleep, crawl out of bed. You put your soft pants on, you go up into the, you go up into the studio, you fire up the laptop, and, you got the whole world at your hands all of a sudden. And, in the kind of, midst of everything that's going on out there, if you can kind of just, ease into that spot, or have the ability to, I'm so grateful for that. And, so there's a lot that I feel grateful for. I also, I think it's, and I'm so guilty of this, but it's so easy to just like talk about 2020 as this, fuck this year. And it's, oh man, but so much has happened that is so critical to us getting better. It's like, again, the stuff that this year has exposed, it needed exposing. It's probably high time, and so, I guess it's not so much about gratitude as much as it's about recognizing that, this was a really, really important year, and to have lived through it and been involved in it and been able to create something in it. I'm grateful for a lot of that. And I'm grateful to be able to kind of see the year for more than just the sort of shitstorm that it was, So.
That would be easy to do.
Very easy, easy. Yeah, for sure. And and I've definitely done that, but it's, there's a lot more to it than that. And, there's a lot of work to do, I think, on the heels of 2020, but, I think people are probably more ready than maybe they've ever been. And so, let's hope.
Yeah. Dude. So this was great, Sam.
Thanks, man.
I enjoyed this.
Thanks, boys. I appreciate the questions, man.
Sure.
Really,
Sure. You are the start of me not interviewing anybody I can't stand behind.
I appreciate it, man. I'm very, very, very glad to be that person.
Sure. And, because I love the album.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's weird because it's like total ground floor. I think there you are. It's total like ground floor, starting fresh, so just to have you take a listen to it and take the time to speak with me I really, really appreciate it.
Sure. You're welcome, man.
Thank you.
Best place for people to check you out online, keep up with what you're doing, get the album.
Best place would be, social media thing can be elusive for me at times, but definitely Instagram, which would be Sonny X Burnett at Instagram.
Your alias.
And then my alias, indeed. And that would probably be the best way to engage with me. And then, you can listen to the record.
Streaming
everywhere, and it's streaming in every stream. Yep.
Sounds good. Anything I didn't cover?
No, man.
Everything.
Man, we got into it. Again, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. What is his life?
'cause he was unbound. Now he's in my heartbeat. But if he ever asks, I'm golden. And if he ever comes, I'm hiding. And if he's ever broke, I'm holding. And if he ever runs, what else is new? Don't matter where I go. Don't matter who I see. Don't matter what I smoke. I'll never be set free. You could stretch your moment into a mile. Take one look, no more, and make me wild. So if he ever asks about me, I'm golden. And if he ever comes back, I'm hiding. And if he's ever broke, he's broke, he's broke. But stay out of my dreams.
And that was Golden from Sonny Burnett. I hope you enjoyed the music. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Sam, Sonny Burnett. Check out the entire album. If you like that song, you will love the entire album. You can find me online several places. TalkMusicTalk.com for more podcast information and to stream every single episode. You can also find me on Instagram at This Is Boice, so follow me there. And I would appreciate if you would subscribe to the podcast wherever you like to listen to podcasts. iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and pretty much everywhere else. Just search for Talk Music Talk. And there is also an app. It is free wherever you like to get your apps. So wherever you happen to listen, please leave a 5-star rating and or review because it helps to expose the show to new audiences, new listeners, and I would appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening. This is the last show of 2020, so happy holidays to you and a happy new year. See you in 2021. Until next time, and there will be a next time, this one's for you, Liz.